introducing. And he does need an introduction because the notes in the bio don't really describe him, so I'll be as brief as I'm able. Adil is very politically active, although he doesn't have a history in politics. He's a crown prince of the Bapedi people, the Bapedi nation, which is about 18 million people, so it's one of the biggest groups or nations in South Africa. And he is from royalty. Both his parents were royalty, and he grew up in a condition under which their royal expectations were suppressed by apartheid. He is part of Transform SA, which is wanting to bring about, as the name implies, transformation in South Africa. He has been an investment banker. He started an ICT startup and then confronted all the regulations and licensing that are an obstacle to that. He has been a civil engineering project manager. He is now in Parliament representing uMkhonto, very close to former President Zuma, and he serves on 2 of the committees in Parliament, portfolio committees, the Electricity and Energy Committee, the Minerals and Petroleum Committee, and I might say he's one of the most active and effective members there, certainly the most knowledgeable, and they have to listen to him. I have been friendly and acquainted with Adil now for some years. We share views on energy policy, and he is very knowledgeable in that field. And I have a little quote from him. He says, "I grew up fascinated by why some countries succeed and while others fail. It always comes down to economics and leadership." And that is what, of course, Temba's been talking about, his journey through that process. Adil, thank you very much, and over to you. And I would say just be mindful of the fact that Adil is not a libertarian. On the contrary, he's quite on the other side, but I'm busy converting him.
Good afternoon. I had hoped after my last comment or question, the whole room will be empty, so I don't have to speak. So I'm still surprised that people are still here. So I just wanted to maybe actually share the gratitude. It's not every day that MK, particularly an MK member, gets invited under the banner of MK. So we take this with extreme gratitude that the platforms for engagement are opening up, and people are interested to hear what we think. I don't come here as an independent person. I come here with the banner of the political party which I represent. So we're quite grateful for this opportunity to really present our views. One, I think it's informed on the basis that the topic of nuclear, as well as energy sovereignty, and looking at how South Africa's mineral resources and reserves have been undermined by external influence, particularly foreign external interference, is quite a huge one. Most of you are all here, South Africans, and you know that the prosperity of our country, the prosperity of your own lives, how you've created yourselves in terms of skills, your ability to create your businesses, your ability to have survived and thrived from the time you were born up to today, where you are in your adult or senior life or mostly highly accomplished life. You know that the bedrock of it was based on energy. If it was not for electricity, we can kiss the entire thing goodbye. I mean, I don't know how white people in South Africa would have survived. Black people certainly do survive without electricity, but definitely not white people. So it's one of those things that you have to give credit. And you would actually do understand that it had to be a fascination of the past, regime, political regime, to ensure that electricity was produced and was produced in abundance and was never commodified. The only time I would hear the word nationalization growing up, reading through materials and text and volumes of text, was in the apartheid government, when they were talking about nationalization of strategic levers of the economy, particularly the energy generation. Before it was liberalized, we all know, it was different companies all performing various aspects of the economy, producing electricity independently, but to a much more, almost market-based, like independent customers here and there, but it was not something that was given at the wholesale level. You would know that the production of electricity, I think South Africa was the second in the world from New York. It was in the Kimberley mining area where the first street lights went on, and then from there electricity was produced thereafter, and it was in 1889 or 86, around that time. And then from there, South Africa just progressed in terms of building its economic powerhouse, as well as ensuring that we could use electricity for the mining industry, for industrialization, and then came in the big bang when government decided that they are going to amalgamate and buy all of the electricity production houses in South Africa, put them under one banner, which was a national company. At the time it was called Eskom, with an ES. And today we have the Eskom that is currently existing from that time and era, and we have transformed it beyond that time. What has then happened post-1994 from the then inherited apartheid electricity generation company, which was doing exceptionally well? One thing apartheid did very well was in the infrastructure and the energy generation sector in terms of development. It was terrible in terms of human rights. It was terrible in terms of how it actually measured and integrated society and was able to help in the Gini coefficiency in terms of human capital development. But on the infrastructure side, you cannot really blame them on what they've done exceptionally well. The present government has failed in the last 30 years to even match a 20% or even 10% exponential rate of what apartheid did then. We give credence to that current ingenious, capability from an engineering point, but come back to the reality. What went wrong post-1994 when government of South Africa was supposed to take on and pick up from those successes of electricity generation, electricity industrialization, and ensuring that it could uplift the poor people out of poverty, particularly move them out of the current abject poverty that we experience in South Africa using electricity. It is not related to much. Poverty is related to infrastructure and human development. If we had produced enough electricity in abundance, just the electricity component part of it would have propelled people to be moving out of abject poverty to a little bit of a middle class or an entry into middle class, and then post the middle class where you now become an elite and rich and then the wealthy. We haven't been able to do that because South Africa literally took a nap for 30 years and woke up to a crisis in the last 7 years plus, when load shedding became a major catastrophic crisis for this country. When for the first time we realized that we didn't prepare enough to build our sector into a robust energy generating and energy security based environment. Our policies became lackluster. Everyone could come and influence, particularly foreign governments, came into South Africa, brought in a lot of people to come and influence our policy sector in the electricity generation. I mean, for the first time when I realized that the ANC has no more hope, that the ANC has lost complete course in terms of governing this country, is when I started seeing their papers on policy of electricity completely pointing us totally elsewhere. Most of these papers were manufactured by German consultants, were manufactured by Nordic consultants, were manufactured by European Union consultants, which gave it to the ANC and made it an ANC policy statement. And that's when we started disagreeing ideologically on where this country should be going. And that is almost 10 plus years ago when we understood that there's going to be a huge problem coming. Because at that time, the policy trajectory said, shut down power stations. And the power stations we're talking about now were power stations relating to coal-based power stations. And those policies were enforced on the ANC because the ANC was broke at the time, needed money, etc. And for funding purposes, they had to agree or give up something in order to entice foreign investors. Here, in the case of foreign countries that are currently sitting with a significant DFI in South Africa, and they had to give away part of their infrastructure development programs. Eskom was told to defund its maintenance of power plants. There was a program to discourage anything that related to nuclear. If you could remember several years ago, if you said the word nuclear, I would have been persecuted. I mean, most likely this whole group, if there were nuclear, non-nuclear heads would have literally come hard on me. It was unfashionable. We took a knock, and I was one of those that was even called a Russian spy. I mean, I don't know the Russians in that case. I've met a few Russians in South Africa, but I was called a Russian spy. I was paid by Putin and everything. And one day when I sat in Johannesburg and I met the Russian ambassador, and I said to him, by the way, you owe me money. He said, what money? I said, apparently I'm paid by the Russians, so you need to fulfill on that promise that people have kept up. And then those were believable views. I mean, picture yourself 10, 15 years in South Africa, where all sorts of views were running around politically, and people were fashioning all sorts of narratives. They wanted to destroy the nuclear industry. There was a direct interference on the coal industry. And then another narrative said that I worked for the coal industry, coal transporters industry, and the coal industry. And none of these groups I have ever met, particularly to sit down and say, we needed support on this, or I needed money on that. And probably if I worked for them, I would have been a multi-millionaire today, because I would have made a lot of money tolling them for the work we've done. But because we came from a basis of authenticity, we needed to change this country, and we needed to make a fundamental difference. And when we said we wanted to transform South Africa, it was not just a benign intention, it was a true intention, seeing where fundamentals are going wrong. And we understood that the minute the lights go off, everything is going to go wrong. Everyone sitting in this room can definitely testify that you have had that experience of load shedding. And when it happened, at the time we even predicted that it's going to happen, it shattered everything. I mean, 100 smelters in South Africa were shut down. It's not a small thing. 100 smelters. Refineries were shut down. We're talking about guys who were doing their own backyard smelting, running their own foundries, had to close down. Massive steel-based industries had to go down. You've got, the manufacturing sector, which was the most second largest in Africa, had to completely be folded up. What are you left with between Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg? You're left with warehouses. We import goods, whether we're buying from Shein, Amazon, it doesn't matter where. You're left with warehouses that are shipping in goods. So the threat of what is currently happening in this country, where politically, if you put your guard down and you have this foreign interference in forms of foreign governments, they don't come here as clandestine or people looking like crooks or thugs, or they are looking like men in black with guns and whatever to shoot you down. No. These are guys who come in and infiltrate your country in a very sophisticated way. They come in, they get embedded into government, they get embedded into judiciary, they get embedded into legislation, and they push in interests that have to do with deindustrialization of South Africa. It was a shock when we had, for instance, that the judiciary took a decision to stop the building of nuclear power station. A lot of people got a shock to say, but why? They said no, because of a technicality, the stakeholders engagement element. Yes, the stakeholders were not engaged, but when we go to the process, we did find that stakeholders were engaged properly. People were already put into a process and everything, but you then start understanding that there is minute areas of negligence where we were neglectful. And the government was quite, okay, and said, okay, we'll restart the process, we'll shelve it, put it back, make sure that when we do it, we'll do it thorough and okay. At the time, again, it was a scaring tactic of saying the Russians, the Gupta, nuclear, as well as all of the corruption around nuclear. But that was not the truth. The fact was they were trying to do the drill down of South Africa's economy and ensuring that the economy of South Africa does not perform above the expected threshold. We're an economy that is intense in terms of industrialization, we had petroleum sector, we had the mineral sector. But when we wanted to take that to another stage of beneficiation where we wanted to create industries of scale, suddenly there was a problem. Nobody wanted to agree that South Africa should move into the level of producing its own resources. We've moved in the last 20 years until today. I'm sitting in the Committee of Minerals, I'm sitting in the Committee of Electricity. Do you know that 98% of all the petroleum fuels in South Africa are not manufactured locally? We are importing petrol, we are importing diesel, we are importing the crude for synthetic fuels that we are producing. 98% of it is not localized. We're sitting with refineries, even from here in Cape Town, that are empty. We're sitting with tank farms that are empty. We're sitting with industrial parks that are completely empty, that are related to petroleum fuels. Either it's to do with gas to liquids or coal to liquids. Most of those farms, the only thing surviving is Sasol. If you go to Mossel Bay and that area, you find there again the production of synthetic fuels based on Mossel Bay has completely ceased. We cannot be drilling again for the gas which we used to find in the ocean because there was a lobby group that objected to shale gas refinery, shale gas exploration in South Africa. Until today, that moratorium to stop the shale gas through the judiciary is still standing. But what happened there, where I actually applaud our judiciary in terms of the way it has been able to move at least gradual away from this kind of, capture scenario is, they said no, for the last 10 years when they stopped the moratorium of shale gas, they said then you would have a 10-year gap of understanding the sector. After the 10 years, the moratorium to stop shale gas will end. Then you will have a window to start the exploration. 10 years has lapsed last year. The year we are in is the year whereby government should be opening up the moratorium for shale gas. Let me give you an understanding of this one, and you will be shocked. The shale gas currently in the Karoo, right in the Western Cape, they said the current value of South Africa's shale gas is the equivalent of Guyana 3 times. Guyana is sitting with about, I think it's 110 billion cubic feet of energy in terms of shale gas. South Africa is sitting off that current reserve 3 times. Guyana's current GDP is 64% of GDP growth today's terms. So you can just imagine the explosion that if we were to start exploring the current reserve that we have in South Africa. Moving from shale gas, which we are not exploring, there's no work happening in it. We should be opening up these wells throughout the desert in the Western Cape, the Karoo side of it, in order to open up this economic miracle and explosion. We're doing nothing about it. People are still getting poorer, people are dying out of poverty. Every day we hear issues of people going out of business and opportunities being sealed and closed down. And it's ordinary people like us in the group, in the seminar today, who makes a difference. I stood up as an individual and found a movement, but we agreed on energy. And based on that, we were able to work all of these years together. And to the point where collectively, when we put up this whole group that started the movement to oppose load shedding in terms of the introduction, the destroying of Eskom gradually, as well as ensuring that South Africa's energy sovereignty can be curtailed. Everyone came along. White, Indian, colored, black, everyone was in this movement. And it was an incredible feat of transformation to see that South Africans could work together if there's a common interest. And what we all identified is there was a common enemy in the room in respect to our energy policy, and this enemy had captured the host, which is the ANC and its government at the time, because the ANC was still dominant at the time. It was the ruling party, it was making all the rules, and they were making sure that they are manufacturing a crisis which ended up last year in a major scenario where we were having load shedding stage 6, 8, And some current, ludicrous individual even designed a stage 16 scenario in terms of stages of load shedding. They were that crazy, these people. They would sit there and say, no, we actually have to dial it up to stage 16 and make sure that in this stages. And we said, no, it's not going to happen, because here are the fundamentals. Here is where the problem is. And if you cannot do it, we are pleading to you to say, please hand it over so that people can take it over and make sure they can make a difference. It was a group of individuals who fought hard. Unfortunately, some of us got literally labeled and literally marked for all sorts of things. And we survived that whole trial and trauma, and we couldn't do much, we couldn't work anywhere, we couldn't be influenced. So being in politics today, being able to have made a change, being in parliament, was by almost a miraculous feat. We survived individually, we survived independently because of good-hearted people and the work that we're doing and the experience that we have. But in terms of South African politics, it's quite an incredible animal which is so complicated. You say the wrong things, they literally black you out. You're blacklisted, you're not accepted within crowds, and as a result, you become a persona non grata. We survive by a miraculous feat, and maybe crazy people like, the former President Jacob Zuma, who said, guys, you are on the right track and we love what you're saying and we want to support you. And when we created the movement, uMkhonto weSizwe, a lot of people didn't realize it was a protest movement against the current policies that nearly sent the ANC to its complete death. We were the people who said we're going to bring about sanity, and within that sanity, we're going to bring about policies that will survive and uproot the current decay of a policy trajectory in South Africa. We are very policy orientated. We will be told that uMkhonto weSizwe is riddled with all sorts of crazy people who are non-intellectual, who don't know what they're talking about. Actually, the extreme opposite is the truth. We've got a lot of intellectuals there, highly educated people, intelligent, smart, well-traveled, people who understand. You've got people with previous background in academia, a previous background in the judiciary, who understand industry, etc. But because of the hostility of the environment, they are unable to come out openly and speak. We meet almost in quiet environments, and they are able to add value. And black and white, all across this racial spectrum. So to change this country, it doesn't take a movement of angry people always to make a difference. Sometimes it takes a group of deliberate. We were deliberate when we went and opposed load shedding and the introduction of shutting down of Eskom and the breaking up of the Eskom as a utility. When the movement to actually break it up into pieces and then sell it up apart so that they could make a fortune out of it. Just to give you an example, currently Eskom is generating about almost 400 billion in revenues. It's a state-owned company. The minute it goes out of the state-owned entity basis, you have shareholders, you have got markets that must have an interest in it. The value that will be added onto it will be over $1 trillion in terms of revenue, right? Because you have to add other costs, which means you have to extract from already an overly extracted environment. The cost of electricity is going to go higher. The ability for you to distribute proportionally, especially to the most poor, is going to be lessened. So what does it do? We talk about the concept of being libertarians. I think maybe I'm a closet libertarian because I follow the libertarian ideology. So when you talk about those things, where is our heart when we realize that some of these things do affect the most vulnerable of our society and we have no other solution? And that is why at this stage, does not mean it's a life contract. At this stage, you cannot afford not to have a state-owned or state-run major majority in electricity generation. So in conclusion on that part of it is, we need to lessen the level of foreign interference in our space of energy policy, and we need to maximize South Africa's capability to stand on its own in terms of really controlling our destination on policy on energy. Thank you so much.